So IGN today published a review of a game. Let's see it.
After the massive success of both Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise, it makes sense that Capcom would do whatever it can to welcome that wider audience into the next frontier. That's exactly what Monster Hunter Wilds does, smoothing out the already excellent process of turning big scary dragons into silly little hats to be faster, more flexible, and less fiddly than ever before.
Yeah.
The other side of those dual blades, however, is that Wilds is light on any real challenge, even for what I'd expect at launch. Never ask more flexible and less fiddly than ever before. The other side of those dual blades, however, is that Wilds is light on any real challenge, even for what I'd expect at launch, never asking me to think hard about my equipment. But while the monsters may not pose much of a threat this time around, smart tweaks to combat still mean the act of carving them up has rarely felt better.
Where's his video of him killing Arkveld on the beta? Did he do it? Did he stream himself killing Arkveld on the beta? He didn't do that, did he? There isn't one. Okay, I didn't think so.
My first surprise in Wilds was that the campaign isn't just a totally forgettable excuse to kill anything that crosses your path this time. Okay, it's still mostly that as you explore yet another uncharted land to solve some mystery. But while the story itself isn't particularly fresh, the difference here is that the characters within it are actually pretty great.
Well, yeah, the girl is hot. That's what's that's what matters.
The excitable engineer Gemma.
We are so gonna talk later, pal.
Your empathetic handler Alma.
Oh, but I've definitely heard of him.
Or the total space cadet of a biologist Eric.
This forest is amazing.
Your team is full of likable personalities and little character arcs throughout the gorgeously animated cutscenes.
See? Told you they'd be fine.
And that was enough to get me more invested. The revamped structure of Wilds also means that campaign is significantly shorter than I was expecting. I reached the credits in just 15 hours and didn't have to fight a single monster twice in that time, getting enough materials from any initial encounters to keep my gear up to snuff and jump right from one mission to the next.
Okay.
When you compare that to the 40+ hours it took to see the end of the story in World, it feels like the intent is to allow more people to quote-unquote beat Wilds. And
I just want to see, when did I beat the game? Like, is there a playlist for this? I beat the game. So if I add in all the time that I played the game, 5 hours plus 4 again, plus 4, plus 3, plus 2, I mean, yeah, I guess it was like 25-hour campaign. Yeah, I would say it took a little bit longer, but like including stream stuff, I don't think that's necessarily too much different. Yeah, I don't know, guys. That's not counting all the grinding you did? Yeah, sure. Let me go back. I fucking lost it. Where'd it go? There it is.
I certainly appreciate how that shift toward approachability might appeal to anyone who has been traditionally intimidated by the series.
Yeah, sure.
But as a veteran, I can't help but be a little disappointed that I literally didn't get knocked out once in that entire time. There's never a skill or armor testing wall of a monster that forced me to really consider my equipment choices more deeply in order to earn the reward of a hard-fought victory. Avoiding spoilers.
I just don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know about this, bro. Like, you did the demo on an overtuned monster for hardcore players. They got the previous version of the full game, which is probably an easy version for the reviewers. Yeah, maybe that's it.
There is, of course, more to do once you get past the credits. That's where the larger changes Wilds makes to the traditional Monster Hunter loop really start to shine.
Okay, let's see it.
Gone are the days of returning to a separate town between every hunt, then going down the same checklist of tasks before you're ready for the next one. Pretty much everything you need is out in the field with you, and you're never more than a lickety-split loading screen away from whichever beautiful area you want to be in.
That's nice.
Convenient adjustments are all over the place, like food buffs being tied to a timer now that sticks around between hunts.
After you
It doesn't even tick down while in camp, making a previously repetitive process substantially smoother without removing the depth it added to hunts.
Nothing like home.
That's true. That's true. That's an improvement for sure.
The roaringly successful result of those changes is that a vast majority of the friction past games could produce as you start and stop and restart between every encounter has been removed. Now you can just check your map for monster information and go hunt. The monsters you'll face are also...
I think that's a good and a bad thing. Like, for example, I think it's really good that you have, like, auto-crafting, and this is in Monster Hunter World. Like, if you have potions and you loot honey, it will auto-craft them into max potions or mega potions, whatever they are. And, like, you have other things that are, like, kind of... Like, because I think Monster Hunter Wilds is going to be that game where... Because I'm comparing this, like, a lot of this criticism is actually very similar to the criticism that people had for Elden Ring. Is that with Elden Ring, a lot of people said that a lot of the base game was actually very easy and it wasn't challenging to them hardly at all. And so now I'm thinking about this from that context and I'm like, well, I don't necessarily know. That doesn't necessarily make the game bad. The customization while Elden Ring was hard. I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think so that much, but like that's also as somebody that I played all the other ones.
Generally excellent. That could be a flashy newcomer like the flamenco-inspired La Labarina.
Yeah, this one looks really cool.
Or Wild's headliner Arkveld and its chain-like appendages.
Yeah.
But the true stunner has to be New Udra. The tentacles of Monster Hunter's first octopus-like creature can be as unpredictable to contend with as you might expect, especially when they're literally on fire. And the satisfaction of severing every single one of them over the course of a hunt is second to none.
Yeah, no doubt. That's awesome.
The appeal of Monster Hunter's fights has always been how it empowers you with flashy moves and hard-hitting attacks. But knowing when to strike and where to stand and how the monster will behave next is just as important as figuring out which buttons to press.
That's true. He's right.
That's true in Wilds too, but combat is also more flexible and forgiving here. For example, you can adjust your footing a little more mid-combo, resulting in fewer moments where a mistimed attack with a long animation had me embarrassingly slicing at the air.
Which is a huge improvement, by the way. Massive, gigantic fucking improvement. Because Monster Hunter Worlds, it is a very clunky game. And, like, it's not like that's necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, yeah, the focus mode and everything else, like, having focus mode and then having a lot of defensive reactive gameplay that they added, like with the parries and the perfect parries, and then also with the, there's one more I'm thinking of, the clashes, like, that's something that allows people that are fans of action combat games to get into Monster Hunter early while still maintaining the ceiling for the game, because the best players will, of course, be the ones that don't even need to do that in the first place.
In many ways, the combat feels like it's all about the new wound system this time. Wounds open up once you deal enough damage to a given body part, and then you'll deal extra damage when attacking. But deal enough damage to a wound and it'll break, resetting that spot. Every weapon also has a simple to execute focus strike that will deal a burst of damage to a wound and break it right away. So maximizing the amount of time you leave one open and then using that finisher before it closes naturally is an interesting subgame to manage.
Sure.
Or at least it would be if Wilds ever presented me with a challenge that pushed me to make those considerations. Whether I was playing online or solo, I've never had a mission reach the 20-minute mark, and I've only fainted 2 times total across dozens of hours. Compare that to World, which had real tests like Kieran, who smacked me silly my first couple of attempts, forcing me to...
Didn't Kieran get added later on in the game? Like, I don't remember, like, I heard that it was added after launch, but I could be wrong about that. It was in the game baseline? Okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
Regroup and craft an armor set around thunder resistance, and it's hard not to feel like Capcom's desire to make this
is it possible that maybe this guy just sucked? Because, like, the first time I fought the Kirin, like, I even fought the Arc-Tempered Kirin, I killed it my first try. Like, you're so biased? Really? I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't think so. Like, yeah.
And more
OP
inviting
gear,
Monster
though?
Hunter sanded off some of the bumps I actually
You mean I got good
enjoyed
gear
in
for my
terms of
character?
overcoming big
Wow.
threats. Things do ramp up a little bit in the post-game, but even there I only really had to worry about upgrading my armor or falling behind in damage once or twice during the content that's available at launch. After the 15 hours it took me to beat the campaign, I only had to spend another 15 to finish every side quest that wasn't about catching fish, and just 5 more after that before I had the best armor set and weapon I could get, and a pretty solid suite of skill-boosting decorations. To be fair, I still have plenty more equipment I could grind for, but my usual desire to get the top-tier weapon of each elemental type and put together specialized outfits for certain challenging fights just isn't here this time, because those fights aren't here either. I think a lot of this comes down to raw numbers that could hypothetically be tweaked in one of the many patches that are sure to come, but some of what makes things so easy also seems to be baked into the bones of Wilds. For example, nearly every time you focus strike a wound, the monster gets locked into a little stagger animation, and you'll be breaking wounds a lot. Meanwhile, on the crafting side of things, my
Well, they're probably just going to make it to where the wounds don't activate as often, right? Like, whenever you go into higher difficulty modes. And also, like, I mean, I don't know, like, I think if you want to make, the difficulty of the game, I feel like as somebody who's played Monster Hunter World, like, I didn't think that Wilds was, like, really super hard either. But, I mean, Arkfeld was hard, but he was, like, overtuned. But, like, besides Arkfeld, the game was pretty easy. That's why you said it could be patched. Yeah, exactly, right? And so, like, I just don't really see this as being a problem. That's wrong. There's hard monsters at the end game in Wilds.
The best armor was way shorter than I ever expected because materials that are usually super rare can sometimes show up as guaranteed rewards when looking at the monster list on your map. That was excitingly convenient initially, but it's also what brought that loot chase to an almost trivially fast end.
Perfection.
I imagine this difficulty tuning will get a lot more people through the front door, but it also means that where my past 3 Monster Hunter reviews wrapped up around the 50 to 60 hour mark while I still had plenty more I was excited to do, I started losing steam with Wilds before I even hit 40. Don't get me wrong, that's still a healthy chunk of game, and it has absolutely been some of the most fun I've had with the series. I'm also sure any longtime fans will be thinking, well, we just have to wait for updates or G-Rank or whatever for the real challenge. But in that regard, Capcom's own roadmap has left me wary. There's only one monster scheduled to be added for all of spring, and then
I think that, like, developing games and making them really hard is probably one of the biggest mistakes that developers can make. I do. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that they can make is that if you make a game really hard, you're just going to make the accessibility for players low. Because, like, and I think Elden Ring is the best example for this. Elden Ring is, in my opinion, a very easy game if you play it in the right way. And it can be a very hard game if you play it in the wrong way. And so the problem is that, and this is something that From Software actually did, and this is what I think makes them a great studio, and I think it's also what makes Capcom a great studio, is because even though new games come out, new players don't necessarily get better. And you don't want to run into the problem that some studios and some franchises have, where, like, now that, like, you're on game number 6, like World of Warcraft is like this, is that the skill gap in the player base, like, you have new players that are coming into the game that are the same, basically, effectively skill level as the old players, but the problem now is that the new players are the same skill level. So, like, the difference is larger and larger and larger. And so, like, did it feel good for me to beat some of the monsters in Wilds, like in World? Like, I feel like, what monster did I feel really good about beating? Like, I mean, like Nergigante, I was really happy about beating him the first time. Barioth, which was in the DLC, and maybe like a couple other ones. Yeah, Alatreon. Yeah, definitely Alatreon. That was a really big one. Velkhana. I hated Velkhana. Like, the boss fight was amazing, but, like, I remember I didn't have Divine Blessing on. I didn't know it, and I thought the game was broken. And like I was really mad. Devilo, yeah, definitely there was that too. Yeah, I was really happy. Raging Brachydos, yeah, that was a really good one too.
Only one currently listed for summer. In contrast, Rise also felt slight at launch, but got 6 new monsters just 1 month later, and then 3 more a month after that. Wilds already feels like it needs endgame threats like its formidable Elder Dragons to really push its limits. And if it instead only gets 1 returning monster in the first 3 or so months after launch, this could be a long wait until its inevitable expansion.
And I think that I'm going to give this guy a little bit of credit. Past performance is an indicator of future performance, and Dragon's Dogma 2 had this exact same problem. And so like I think this could be fair, but I just don't think that like I like difficulty for me, like looking at difficulty as being a factor, I don't necessarily take it that seriously, but I do think it exists. Different teams, though? Yeah, but it's Capcom, and it's 2 really, really big Capcom games. Is Asmongold against difficulty in video games? I'm against difficulty. So challenge and difficulty, in my opinion, are 2 different things, and there's good difficulty and bad difficulty. Like, good difficulty is like Elden Ring, I think. Elden Ring is a difficult game. Like, any From Software game is like that. Like, Sekiro is good difficulty. Bad difficulty is like Dark Souls 2, right? Where it's like you walk through there's a guy that's standing behind you, he hits you, you're dead, right? Like, fucking Dragon's Lair, like the old game. Bad difficulty is like, you can't beat this unless you get to a certain number equivalent. Like I actually thought this is going to be even against like Dragon's Dogma 1. I didn't like the fact that like in Dragon's Dogma 1, you needed a certain level of attack power rank in order to even deal damage to a monster. I thought this was the cheesiest and dumbest type of difficulty you could have in a game. And so like there are a lot, like Lost Ark can be bad difficulty too, right? That was bullshit. Yeah, it was so fucking stupid. And so like making a game harder doesn't make it better, but making a game challenging does. And I don't know whether this game is going to be challenging or not, but I think that as long as players that are experienced have like some of those like end game challenges like Millennia and Elden Ring and other stuff like that, things would be okay. So I'm just not sure like what the difficulty caps and the difficulty levels for the game are.
That all said,
because like in Dragon's Dogma 2, I felt like I had this insanely good character, and there was nothing that I could put it up against that really challenged it. Like, even the hardest bosses in the game and, like, the hardest monsters in the game were just a joke. Like, and there was nothing I could really do, I could do it with, right? Whereas, like, in Dragon's Dogma 1, you had, and again, you can get to the point where you can basically beat the shit out of any boss, even in Dragon's Dogma 1, right? For sure. But, like, it's like so much easier to earn that in Dragon's Dogma 2.
Deserves credit for being what has got to be one of the most customizable games I have ever played. There's a huge host of accessibility features. You can adjust the size of or turn off individual elements on your UI. You have more control than ever over your menus and radio wheels. And you can alter the look of stuff like your mount, chat stickers, and even fast travel tents to a surprising degree. As a crowning touch, you can finally wear any version of each armor set too, essentially doubling the cosmetic options previously available as get into the all-important fashion side of things towards the end. Partying up online has also been made more robust, letting you run around each map with your friends and seamlessly flow from hunt to hunt without having to regroup at camp between each mission. And even if you're largely planning to play solo, there are quality of life changes here for you too. That could be the surprisingly competent AI support hunters that fill empty spots in your party when you fire an SOS flare, but also the inclusion of an online single-player option that lets you fire flares to get help, but still pause the action entirely before you do.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Monster Hunter Wilds continues to smooth off the rougher corners of the series in smart ways, reducing as much friction as possible that could get in the way of you grabbing any of its exceptionally fun weapons and planting them firmly in a monster's hide. But in that quest to make Monster Hunter more approachable, Wilds is sliced a little too close to the bone in some places, trimming its challenge back so much that I barely needed to engage with its in-depth equipment system at all this time to become an apex predator. Its more flexible combat is still some of the most fun I've had with the series, but like the blustering...
I hope that they add in a DLC for this game that's like Shadow of the Erd Tree, and I want to see this fucker review it. After talking about how the game's so easy. Yeah, I want to see that happen. They always do? Yeah.
Lightning storms of its gorgeous desert. It burns brightly but briefly until Capcom
Sandworm
unleashes
well,
some
you do
real
have a
endgame
sandworm.
beasts to challenge us.
Gave the game an 8.
For more, check out our reviews of Avowed or Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
What did Avowed get? Did it just get the traditional IGN 7? Yeah, it did. It got a 7. Okay. Yeah, so IGN, what did you do to Monster Hunter Lady? Yeah, where's the lady that knows the game? I feel like making a game more difficult and having like really challenging boss fights is good to have, but that's not something that you want to do with the campaign. And I think, again, a lot of games need to look at the way... I think that, again, one of the greatest games of all time, Elden Ring, you just look at what Elden Ring did and then do that. That's it. Because, like, you want to have challenges. Like, for example, like in Monster Hunter World, you can fight Rathian early. I didn't even know that. I thought I was supposed to fight Rathian when I did, and apparently I was fighting him very early. The Devil Ho is the same thing in Monster Hunter World. So, and then, like, you even fight Nergigante very shortly whenever you're on Zora Magdaros. And so, like, you have that, and then, what are the other ones? I think there's one more that I'm just not thinking of right at the top of my head. But, like, and so those things, Devil Joe, yeah, I don't know what the fuck it's called, right? But anyway, that kind of content, I think, is really important, but they can add more of that into the game later on. My concern, though, is that, again, the last game, like, one of the last big Capcom games, it's very similar to this, it was Dragon's Dogma. And I am worried that some of the content won't be as substantial, because I think Dragon's Dogma had that problem as well. Yeah, I guess this is good opinion of difficulty of using AI bots and called them surprisingly competent. You've played it yourself. Arkfeld was hard as fuck. Well, the problem is that Arkfeld was hard because he was overtuned. And I think it could have also been a tempered version of Arkfeld, right? Like, that's why it said, like, Unchained Arkfeld or something like that. And I think there was purple around them, too. So I wasn't really sure about that. And also, it was the time limit as well. Like, in the base game, I can't think of any attack that one-shots you in the base game. Nergigante, the dive doesn't one-shot you. I mean, Anjanath Breath maybe one-shots you. Like, if it's that early on, it can. Teostra? What would he do that would one-shot you? I don't even know. Behemoth? That's like extra DLC stuff. That's different. The Supernova? Oh, really? I only fought Teostra a few times. Teostra Nuke can kill you. I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, because you had basic weapons and armor. Yeah, there's that too. And I didn't do anything else crazy. But yeah, I think that difficulty in the game is something that can always be added later on. And making a good foundation for building a Monster Hunter game. Like, I think that they should treat Monster Hunter in a lot of ways, not like a live service in the way that Fortnite is a live service, but in the live service way that Grand Blue Fantasy Relink was live service, or like kind of Baldur's Gate 3, where it's a single player buy-to-play game, but they're going to add in new content. Like Baldur's Gate 3 recently added in like subclasses, for example, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that I would want to see. And I think the criticism of the game being too easy, maybe that's true, but also when I see somebody playing with AIs constantly, like, well, yeah, it's going to be easy if you're playing with the AIs because you're effectively doing a 4-player hunt. I'll tell you this. I have failed a 4-player hunt, I think, once. Other than that, I've never failed a 4-player hunt. And it was against Raging Brachiodos, and I think people just died too many times, right? That was it. Like, you basically never fail them. The Black Dragon? Well, no, because I want to. I solo the boss first. Safi Jiva? No, we killed Safi Jiva in one run because we played with this guy that had a light bowgun that was like maxed out, and he just like basically soloed the boss. So like that's not what happened. Like we farmed the fuck out of him. And so I'm trying to think. Yeah, you never did our Arc Tempered Velkhana? No, for sure. But that's like late post game content. Like that's super far behind. And not if you get carried. No, it's because basically Monster Hunter, one of the big functions of Monster Hunter is being able to preempt movements. And when you don't have to preempt movements because there are multiple targets that the monster can be facing, the game becomes exponentially easier instantaneously. Like it becomes instantaneously easier just by that feature and just by that function. And so you might have gotten carried, mate. Game's trivial with a good team. Well, no. I'm not talking about like when I'm playing like with the Safi Jiva was when I was playing with stream. But like in just I queued this multiple times off stream even. And like off stream, I farmed the fuck out of Raging Brachiodost in order to get like the like his like I think it's his head or something like that. It's like I think it's called like the warhead or something in order to make his sword. And so I farmed that off stream and I got it. And I remember I did it like 7 times. Yeah, I did it like 7 times. And his reactor, yeah. And I think we failed it once and that was it. So I don't know. You need to have played Monster Hunter World on Burn Release to have the true world experience? Yeah, I think so too. Sweaty Monster Hunter players are crying because the game made the game more welcoming and enjoyable for new players. Yeah. And I think also like some of the things that like Monster Hunter players that were like very good and like more experienced with, like that's less important. Knowing monster positioning and monster animations is less important when you can have things like Clash and Perfect Parry with more weapons like the Greatsword. Like giving that tool to the Greatsword makes the Greatsword way more fucking powerful. Like extremely fucking powerful. So I think that's it. This happens every Monster Hunter title. This isn't new, guys. Yeah. Even a Sword and Shield gets clashes. Well, yeah. I think almost everyone does. The game is trivialized through skill and knowledge. It's challenges to overcome. Yeah. And so like if you're an experienced player, I think that's probably what's going to give you a lot more insight. But I mentioned 15 hours to beat the game or 15 hours to beat low rank. I don't know. I'd have to go back and double check. Fire this guy. It's really embarrassing to say they reviewed it on PS5 Pro and not mention a word about performance on it. Well, I mean, yeah, that's true too. Like, yeah, on PC, the performance was pretty problematic. We get it. You're a veteran. Damn. Yeah. And I think, again, like, do you guys see my point of view with, like, how I'm saying that when you start reviewing a game, or sorry, when you start designing a game for your most engaged and most serious and most hardcore audience, you effectively make them your only audience. And so, like, if you make this game and you build it on, like, all of the people that play World, like, for example, like, if From Software made every boss as hard as Margit, basically, right? Or, like, Crucible Knight, early on, like, super early on, obviously. Like, it's not a hard boss fundamentally, but it can be if you're underleveled. A lot less people would have played it, right? And, like, that's not really the way that you develop a good game. And so making difficulty scale with the amount of like people that have played the game long term is always a big mistake because those long term players will always find ways to challenge themselves. They will always do it. And you don't need to worry about that. Is this the same IGN that gave Veilguard a 9? Yes, that's correct. This game is worse than Veilguard. Yes. Yes. That's correct.